Okay, like the thumbnail said, this is my last video about March on the Trains. I'm running late. I should have done it earlier to get it up closer in time to the first one, but in that previous video, I talked about the nonfiction books I read, and they kind of lead into some of the fiction books I read. I read four novels. They're all crime novels. I'm gonna No, I'm not going to go in chronological order, but I am going to give the names. I mean the publication dates, because I notice some channels do that, and I find it very helpful because it really matters when a book was written, especially before and after World War II, in my opinion, and that directly relates to most of these books. But the first one, the newest one, and this is a new book for my channel based on what I mostly read, is Ripley's Game by Patricia Highsmith, which is the third Tom Ripley novel. It was written in 1974. Patricia Highsmith, one of my favorite authors. I have a hard time discussing when people ask who my favorite authors are, because so many times some of the writers that have been most important to me in my life, since I don't often go back and reread, there'll be someone I haven't read in a long time. And these books I read when they came out, or rather, when a lot of her books were reissued in the United States. Do I have an older title? This one really doesn't have any really nice covers. This is, I think, probably one of the current covers for it. It's a really stupid looking cover. Get it? It's a game. He's on a seesaw, but he's alone. This is a series of titles for Highsmith's Ripley books, a series of 5 books that are really kind of literal, and I guess they're meant to be symbolic, but they seem literal to me. Also, the way he's dressed is kind of odd. The first and most famous Ripley book is The Talented Mr. Ripley, which was written in 1955. The next in the series was Ripley Underground, which was not written until 1970. And this one, so that's a 15-year gap. This one is written in 74. She wrote one in, she wrote the 5th book in 1980 and the final book in 1991. So they're quite spread out, although people think of them as the mid-50s, I guess. I don't get the sense this is in fact, I'm sure it's not a historical novel. It's set and takes place in the early 70s. There was a movie made just 2 years after it called American Friend, with Dennis Hopper playing a very un-Ripley like Ripley, a very different set of circumstances, almost a new character, but with the same protagonist. Ripley's not the protagonist, he's the antagonist. It's about another man who Ripley initially who Ripley gets into a lot of trouble. Ripley gets this other man who's just barely an acquaintance into a lot of trouble, really for the most petty of slights. Then he develops a bit of a conscience, decides he needs to enter back into the situation and help this guy out. There's 2 scenes on a train. Basically, a criminal friend of Ripley is looking for someone to hire to do some mob hits in another country. This is set in France. The mob hits are done in Germany. The movie is all set in Germany. Ripley finds a person, an innocent person, who's dying of a rare form of leukemia, and gives the name to his mob friend, who tries to talk the guy into doing the hits. And the hits both take place on trains. One is on a subway, one is on a inner city rail. So, I've read it before. I've read all her books before. This is the first one I've reread. I enjoyed it very much. I picked it because of the train setting, and because I wanted to watch the movie again, but I didn't get to the movie. Excuse me. I tried to do this video 3 times last night, and screwed up the video every time. So hopefully I won't accidentally shut off the recording. But that's what I'm working with. So I don't remember what I said in those videos. I'm sure they were much more brilliant than what I'm doing now. But then there were 3 others that are more linked. The first was the oldest, rather, is Stamboul Train. Stamboul Train, also known as Orient Express. In the older American editions, I think they just call it Stamboul Train now, to make it, to keep it from being confused with Murder on the Orient Express. This was actually written a couple of years before Murder on the Orient Express, which interestingly enough also had a different title in the original British version. It was called Murder on the Calais Coach. And Graham Greene's was called Stamboul Train. The American publishers changed Christie's Murder on the Calais Coach to Murder on the Orient Express, and that's the name that stuck in both countries. Graham Greene's Stamboul Train was changed to just Orient Express. That didn't stick. Now, I believe if you find it, it's just Stamboul Train wherever. Again, like Patricia Highsmith, one of my favorite writers, someone whose books I read constantly once I discovered him. There was a tweet going around the other day about, is there ever been a writer where you've read something by them and immediately know you wanted to read everything by them? And that really ties into all my books here today, because I definitely had that feeling about Graham Greene. I absolutely had that feeling about Patricia Highsmith. Funnily enough, or maybe not, her short story collection, which is called 11, I think it was that one, has a foreword by Graham Greene, who calls her the poet of dread or something like that. Very apt description. She was, I'm going back to Patricia Highsmith again for a bit, she was not published. At the time I discovered her, she had not been published in the U.S. very much, although she was from Texas. Of course, her most famous book, especially early on, was her first novel, Strangers on a Train, because of the Hitchcock connection. Probably second most famous now, and maybe her most famous altogether, was The Talented Mr. Ripley, which has been filmed at least 3 times. There was an HBO series a couple years ago where they aged up all the characters to their mid-40s. Well, they're probably supposed to be in their 30s, but I don't know. I shouldn't get off on that series because I didn't really like it that much. Although the problem with Patricia Highsmith's books, the problem with adapting her books is, in every instance I've seen, they've always tried to dumb the characters down by making them psychologically coherent, psychologically normal. Ripley is a sociopath in the films. First film was a French film called Purple Noon in the 60s. Then there was the Talented Mr. Ripley with Ben Affleck's friend. You know who I mean. A few years ago, where they kind of dumbed it down. And then the most recent version, where they kind of followed the same suit of the 90s version, just trying to make it a gay psychopath kind of story. Kind of putting all the weirdness on the fact that Ripley is supposed to be a repressed gay person who wants to murder someone because he can't have them sexually, and that's really not what her story is about, or any of her stories are about. They're really about these really strange, unmotivated characters. This is a criticism sometimes people have of her, but I think it works very well. Her books are really about just these deep impulses that certain characters have. Like I was saying earlier about Ripley, he's pretty much a sociopath, but then again, he's not, because he sometimes will have his humanity will show through, like when he feels guilty about setting this other guy up. So they're not characters that you can pin down to a psychological type, and that way they're not realistic. They're not psychological novels. They're just very strange, and I love them a lot, but some people don't like that. They feel like it's sloppy writing, or just where sometimes the characters' motivations seem like they just come out of nowhere, and they do. That's kind of the point. A lot of her characters just do impulsively destructive things that they don't even understand. Anyway, so in a sense, she sometimes gets accused of homophobia by doing like the cliche repressed gay murderer guy, but that's not what her books are like, in my opinion. So I don't know how I got back on that, but back to Stamboul Train. Graham Greene. That's how I got off in it. He called her the poet of dread or anxiety or something like that. Her books are really filled with dread and anxiety, and people trying to get away with things that they don't even want to get away with. And so ditto again on Graham Greene, which I read everything I could find. I never read this book. This is one of his earliest books. It is, from what I read, was his first commercial success. And I didn't like it that much. It has a lot of elements in there that Graham Greene will handle much better later on. This is also his first book that he called an entertainment rather than a novel, because he'd written serious novels and what he called entertainments. His first, I believe it was his very first novel, and the one his reputation rested on for a long time, was The Power and the Glory, which is a literary novel. And this is meant to be more of an action novel or something like that, or a suspense novel. The famous story on that is that he wanted to do it with a separate pen name. He wanted to do a series of books, just more like spy novels and things, with a separate pen name, which his publisher was fine with. Much like, Stephen King would do later with Richard Bachman, although he just had too much material to put under his own name. But the publisher said, yeah, he would do that. He would publish this under a different name, but he would not pay the same rates as he would pay for Graham Greene, the famous author. So Graham Greene dropped that idea and just decided, I'll just separate them. I'll just tell people this is an entertainment, this is a serious novel. I really can't tell which are which sometimes. I think one of his best novels is Our Man in Havana, and it's one of his best entertainment novels. Quote, there's a lot of humor in it. I think there was a movie with Alec Guinness. I never saw it. Fantastic book, and it's not to say that that the entertainments are any lighter, or that the stakes are lower or anything. But in this, it's a group of characters on a train, and this comes in very much on my other two books that I'm going to read that I like more than this. Large number of characters seems like the perfect setting. A train seems like a perfect setting to do a story which has a lot of different subplots and stories, the stories of a lot of different characters all at once. And I think that's fairly common. I started to notice that as I was reading these. I don't know. Of course, there are other things just that you could use the same setting for, but it really struck me in these. So anyway, there's a lot of characters in here. They're interesting. They meet like various ends in various countries, various political situations. This was written in 1932. But I didn't enjoy it, maybe because there's just so many better Graham Greene books, which may be why I never read this in the first place, although I don't know how I would have known. and it's just a lot crammed in there. It's very much a young man's book with a lot of ideas and not really as well delineated as they'd be in his greater novels. Then there's two more. I'm going to skip ahead to Dread Journey. Okay, again, talking about writers that you read one book and you want to read everything. This is a new writer for me, but man, she is so good. Pretty well known now. She's going through a revival right now, or in the last decade or so, much like Highsmith did in the 80s. I know her mostly as, let's see if I can find a more recent cover. This is kind of one of the covers that come out now, but she also has, this is one of the, one of the standard ebook publisher reissuer covers. She also has some books out, at least one published by NYRB, New York Review of Books Press, which maybe is her most famous book because it was also made into a movie called In a Lonely Place. And all I really know about her is that she wrote the book that In a Lonely Place, the movie, was based on, which is a fantastic but dismal, very dismal movie about, in the movie it's Humphrey Bogart, Gloria Graham, directed by Nicholas Ray, who had a cameo in the Wim Wenders movie adaptation of Ripley's Game, which was called American Friend. So these books all connect. They all connect. Anyway, she clearly knows a lot about Hollywood. I don't know if she was a screenwriter herself, but In a Lonely Place was a major movie. It's still considered a classic. It's a real downer, though. I'll give you a warning. It's not fun Bogart like The Big Sleep or Have and Have Not or that. It's dark, dreary, dismal, on his deathbed, nearly at age 56, smoking himself to death, Humphrey Bogart. But it is about a screenwriter who's got a really bad anger and alcohol problem, like extremely bad. And he meets Gloria Graham, who's just lovely, and she's always good in everything. She's someone who very versatile. She's a great comedic turn as the second female lead in Oklahoma, and just always wonderful, delightful screen presence who can play comedy and drama very well. But it's grim. And then I read the jacket info for In a Lonely Place, and it sounds like it's a completely different but equally dark story. So I don't know how faithful the book is. But anyway, I picked this one up first because it's a train novel. And also, frankly, it was on Kindle Unlimited. It's one of only a couple of her books that are on Kindle Unlimited. And it is so good. So like I was saying before, it's like great. I found another author who I want to read everything by. A lot of her books seem to be espionage related. Probably because of the time they're written in. They're considered noir novels, but Dread Journey came out in 1945. A lot of her books around that time, they are crime novels, but a lot of times they have a sort of a espionage angle, like a person who's being tasked by the government to do some operation during World War II or whatnot. But this one is a Hollywood story, and if you read the blurb and the Amazon blurb, they're really trying to focus on the modern and making this appeal to the quote-unquote modern audience. And there is some parallels, it's stuff I think that people knew about Hollywood all the time, but for some reason people are acting like it was all just discovered 5 or 6 years ago. But it's a group of people that are on a train ride going to a premiere in New York. They're going to a movie premiere in New York. They're all from LA. I forgot to look up the names of the trains, but it is really kind of fascinating because in this time, and you'll see that there are, books that take place on trains and everything, books and movies that take place on trains that feature these kind of characters that are going through what we call now flyover country. And there's two trains they take. There's a train from LA, two fast trains. There's a train that goes from LA to Chicago, and then they take the other train from Chicago to New York. This takes place on the first leg of the journey, which is LA to Chicago. There's a film producer, a famous, well-known, very powerful film producer, who other characters on the train are like his secretary, who's a woman named Mike, nicknamed Mike. Pretty sure he killed his first wife. And then there's the woman he's with now, who is also his superstar, his construct, whatever. She's a movie star that he wants to play in, or who's up for his production of the female lead in, of all things, The Magic Mountain, the book I keep telling myself I need to read soon, Thomas Mann's Magic Mountain. So they're going to a premiere of something else. There's also a younger woman actress on the train that is kind of friends with the established star, who the established star starts to be paranoid that her producer boyfriend, can't remember now if they're boyfriend or married, wants to replace. And and because of the rumors of what the producer did with his first wife, she's pretty convinced he's going to kill her. And this character is an important part of the early part of the book. He's a porter, and his race is not mentioned in the book, which I thought was an interesting way to handle it. It might be a little confusing now if people don't know that these jobs were performed, I believe, universally by black people at the time, by young black men. It was kind of the one job that they were allowed to do. He's a very interesting character. He's very helpful. The only really clue that you get that he's black in the book, I think if you were reading it at the time, 1945, you would know he's black just by the job he has as a Pullman porter. But the producer guy is thinking about firing his assistant, Mike, his secretary, Mike. I think they would call a personal assistant today, but she's called a secretary in the book. And hiring the porter, who because he takes a lot of trains back and forth, he's has a good relationship with this kid, and he goes, I would do it in a second, but I don't care what people think or anything, but and so you could see where it would be where he can't do it because of the racial element, or doesn't think he could, or it would be a problem. That's really the only reference to that character. So, and there's a couple other characters. There's a drunk screenwriter, there's a washed up screenwriter, as there always is in these things, it seems. And there's a kind of sleazy reporter. There's a group of people, again, like the others, and it's so well written. In fact, I read like 2 or 3 chapters, and then I realized I had to start over because I was not giving it the proper attention. Like reading something like those Paul Theroux books that I read, they go very fast, and I thought, wait a minute, I have to slow down here, because each chapter, each subsection of a chapter is introducing a different character, and very close point of view, very close third-person point of view of their thoughts, and each character is very different from the others, and that's what I think her real strength in this novel is putting so many people in it that are really well written and seem true to life. And she writes male and female characters equally well. I wish every writer could do that, but they can't. The only thing I would say at the end of this is there's a bit of a twist at the end, where a character, I think, kind of acts out of character. It's a little rushed. It's a little formulaic in the end, almost as if Dorothy Hughes was maybe a little constrained by the elements of the genre could have been a bit longer of a book, then it probably would have been pushed out of the category paperback mystery novel section. Could have been a more ambivalent ending, which also would have pushed it out of the category, but it kind of reels it back into category straightforward mystery writing. But who knows? I have to read more of her books to find out if that's just a usual misstep. And it's really, I hesitate even to mention it because it is a satisfying, emotionally satisfying ending in a way. It is just not as true to one particular character as I felt it could have been. So a fantastic writer, though. A fantastic writer of character. Plot, a little less so is what I'm trying to say, but great characters, great motive, great understanding of dynamics between different people, powerful people, and people that they use, and people that allow themselves to be used and then realize that that's maybe not such a great deal as they go down the line and find out what the true cost of it is. So terrific novel. And like I said, I want to read more books by her. Then the fourth and final book was which is written 4 years after Stamboul Train and 9 years before Dread Journey. So Dread Journey was right at the end of the war. The Wheel Spins, 1936, pre-war. Now this book, I debated whether I should talk about this with the Paul Theroux books because there is one similarity and one contrast. The Wheel Spins was made into a Hitchcock movie, The Lady Vanishes, which is probably the best of his early period. I would say it's definitely the best of his early British films before he moved to Hollywood. It's now published by the British Library Crime Classics, which is a series you can rely on for really good reissues. The Wheel Spins by Ethel, Lina White. And it is about a woman. Again, it starts out where it almost could have gone either way. It could be a straightforward mystery novel, or it could be like a really strong novel of character, like who would write who? Somerset Maugham or Stephen Swig or anybody, who was not concerned with genre. But I'm having throat things tonight. Sorry about that. But The Lady Vanishes, or The Wheel Spins, starts out with this character, and I'm so bad with names, I really wish maybe I should stop and look up her name, but it's probably not that important. Anyway, it's this young woman who is... And the first third of the novel, I really love the setup before we even get to the train, before we even get to the mystery, which involves this character sitting next to an older woman on the train who's kind of chatty and friendly. Our heroine falls asleep. When she wakes up, the old lady's gone. She looks for her on the train. Nobody has heard of this woman. Nobody has seen this woman. Nobody believes this woman exists. That's the premise. That's the gimmick, whatever, the MacGuffin or whatever. It's the heart and soul of the Hitchcock movie, especially, which is a great movie. Quite different, though. The book starts out, though, the first third of the book is about her. What creates the conditions that her character finds herself in, and why she has so much trouble convincing other people that this woman is missing or that she even exists. She is traveling with a group of friends. She has even a backstory before the backstory where she was engaged to some person. She describes herself as being what are they called? She's semi-society girl. She's like the kind of person whose picture gets in the paper when she's because she's getting engaged. So she's not from the middle class or the lower middle class. She's at least from the moderately high middle class. And she's traveling with all these other kids, people her age. So she remarks about how she was famous for having her picture get engaged, and then she was famous again for having her picture in the paper when the engagement was broken off. So she's traveling with all these people in some unnamed country near northern Italy. The reason it's unnamed is there's an espionage element in this too. She's just partying with these people, and she mentions, so there's like a whole other setup of, I don't know, Evil and Noir or something like this, background of what these kids are all up to there. And she's with this group of people, and they've really been on vacation too long. She mentions, it's third person, but the narrator mentions how the marriage vows became a little slippery among the group of different people. She is friends with another young woman in the group, who's married and who accuses her of being too. It doesn't say sleeping, and it may or might, but she accuses our heroine of spending too much time with her husband, or flirting with her husband too much, which gets our heroine upset on two levels. First of all, she thinks, like, why I wouldn't sleep with your gross husband anyway. And on the other hand, it's like, how dare you? After all I've done for you. I don't know what she's done for her, but in her mind, she's done stuff for this woman, and she says, I'm never going to be nice. I'm never doing anything nice for anybody again after the way this woman, Olga, treats her, accuses her. So the friend group is breaking up, and it's really just a case of them just being partying too long in this hotel, and they want to go to Trieste, I think it is. So they're near northern Italy somewhere. And she decides to stay at the hotel, and it's in the mountains. It's kind of like alpine kind of place with this. It sounds really nice, actually. This resort hotel with a lot of foreigners. She's English. Most of the other people who seem to be staying there are English too, that she interacts with. She's not a very she's not a very attractive person, in the same way that if you watch my other video that Paul Theroux isn't. She's kind of snotty. She kind of gets irritated that people don't speak English. Of course, she's mad at all her friends. She goes on this hike. She gets lost. A man tries to help her. He doesn't speak any English, which she finds really annoying. Then she finds a couple, this couple of newlyweds, to follow back to her hotel, but she's basically on her own, but there's other people in the hotel who know her, and they are done with her too, because apparently her friend group, we find from their point of view, is just like a really annoying, obnoxious, young, rich people, drunk all the time and being loud and boisterous, and they're so glad that group is left, although this one girl's still there with them. So they don't like her. Nobody likes her. She doesn't like anybody. She injures herself on the trail. She falls down the trail, gets sort of disoriented. Eventually gets back to the thing. Then she decides she's got to go home because, of all this is happening. And so she books herself on the train, and all the other people who are in the hotel book themselves on the train too, and they're really not happy to see her on the train or at the station, and she's not happy to be traveling with them. She hoped to get away from them, but she also feels like she's got to get out of there because she's alone. There's a very important mindset that she has in the first part of the book, where she talks about the cloud. Like, she's always been protected by a cloud of other people, the cloud around her. Now she has no cloud. There's no people around her, no fiance, nothing to protect her from society and everything. So that's how she refers to her sheltered life, and she doesn't have one now, so she wants to get back to England. And they're very annoyingly patriotic, all the English people in here, about themselves versus other countries and foreign people. So anyway, they all end up there at the train station. She passes out, or we think she might pass out, or it's really not clear if she's hit over the head or not, but she's out for a couple hours in the train station. She wakes up. She's very disoriented. At this time, you think it has something to do with maybe her fall on the trail, like maybe she's injured herself or anything. But all this build up. Then she gets on the train. She meets this woman who's very jovial and friendly. The only nice person who's, she's a stranger. She hasn't seen her before, but. And like I say, then she goes to sleep again because she's got a concussion or something, and wakes up and the woman is gone. And people are like, so this really builds a great level of understanding in the reader, or of why no one believes her. And like maybe, even from our point of view, I mean, if you've seen the movie, it's spoiled, but maybe there was no woman. Because this girl, she's had some kind of injury, and people really don't really believe her. And that's one of the reasons people don't believe her. It's not just because nobody's seen the other woman. This just seems like such a crazy story from this person who's annoying everybody. And why I thought that was interesting compared to Paul Theroux is, I never disliked reading about this woman or anything in fiction the way I disliked reading about Paul, where he has many of the same characteristics, where he's really not that pleasant. He's kind of off-putting. Didn't stop me from reading his books, but in a novel, it did not stop me from being sympathetic to her. Is that because she's a fictional character and Paul's ostensibly a real person? Paul Theroux, the author, is ostensibly, and I say ostensibly because, we only have, just like in a novel, we have only what the author wants to tell us. So Paul might be quite different in real life. He might not realize how he comes off, or he might be playing a character in his own writing for reasons of his own. I don't know. And it really hasn't affected, I've never heard people talk about this aspect of his character, how he's just an annoying kind of prig. In all the years that I've known about these travel books, although some of the people in the book club group I was on, the Voxer group, sort of got that feeling, and David Novak left a note yesterday saying he kind of got that feeling, but I've never heard it before from reviewers or anything. But maybe attitudes change, but it doesn't really make me stop reading a novel. And The Lady Vanishes, or The Wheel Turns, I just think The Lady Vanishes is a much better title. The Wheel Spins, I should say, 1936. Again, I'll read the author's name because I think I forgot to do it. Ethel Lina White. Did I show that cover yet? Again, this is what it looks like now. Very well written, very suspenseful. You are with the main character all the way, even though she is perceived as kind of a jerk and acts like kind of a jerk. So you can see where people would think she's kind of a jerk just because of her associations, her group, just a bunch of obnoxious, loud, drunk young people, and them having gone and her being left behind. And and that's how she loses and that's maybe where the sympathy comes in, how she loses what she calls the cloud. She has no one. She's really alone. She also, as I said, definitely vows not to try and help anybody again. And then she spends the whole novel trying to help this old lady, the elderly lady, who vanishes because she thinks something's happened to her. And it turns out, spoiler alert, it's a suspense novel, so something did happen to her. And maybe it's those kind of things that make an obnoxious character, an unpleasant character, more sympathetic. First, we see it from her point of view. We see she's got things to learn. She does change in the course of the course of the thing, but I don't know. I didn't find her unbearable the way I did Paul Theroux being a character of telling his own story. Maybe because the things that happen to him are just things he decided to do because he wanted to write a book. So I don't know. Those are the books. Stamboul Train, 1932, Graham Greene. The Wheel Spins, 1936. Got to read the, forget her name again, Ethel Lina White. Then what was next? Dread Journey, 1945 by Dorothy B. Hughes. And Ripley's Game, Patricia Highsmith, 1974, the third book in the Ripley series. Her only series, 5, but she probably wrote, I'm going to say around 30 novels. She probably published at least 45 books, including collections of stories that appeared first in German, because she was very popular in Germany, in Europe in general. So some of her short story collections, which are hard to get into print anytime, were not even published in her native language originally until her books started coming out in the 80s when she had a revival in the United States. There's a couple biographies of her. There's a collected stories, then there's an uncollected stories or previously unpublished stories. So she wrote a lot of short stories too. She's an excellent short story writer. I'm just rambling now. That is the end of March on the Rails. So great list of hosts. I'll put their names in the comments again so you can go back and read some of their, or go back and watch some of their videos, their wrap-up videos. And hopefully they'll do it next year. I think they said they're going to. I would love to do it again. It was one of the most fun events I've participated in. Although I don't know if I would do a Voxer. I don't know if I would join Voxer for another event because then what have I got to talk about on the channel? But anyway, I want to thank them again for letting me into the Voxer chat and for starting the event. And yeah, I guess I'm winding down. Okay, talk to you later.